One, two, three, four.
Did anybody know where that comes from? What movie that comes from? Yeah. Fiddler on the Roof. Okay, and as a classical musician, here's a little clin d'oeil, a wink to classical music. And what does it mean to be our own fiddler on the roof? So, getting back to traditions now, let's talk about what is tradition and what is the etymology of it. So, the first part of tradition is trance. So it's, we're talking about a cross. There's a notion of a space or a gap to be bridged in this notion of tradition. And the second part of it is dare, to give. So we have the notion of space to bridge, and then we have with dare, we know it's more than one person. We cannot give if we don't have the receiver on the other end. And we're also talking about generosity and giving of yourself. So in this tradition, we have both space and coming together. We can't do it all by ourselves, so it's already in community. But what does that mean? What does it mean for us? So we know it describes the action itself. But bizarrely, in these two halves of the word tradition, we don't have a sense of time. We just have the act itself, but we don't talk about what happens before, why we're motivated to go across the bridge and to share something with somebody else. And we don't talk about what happens after. And that's very strange because tradition is all about time as well. Because tradition links the past with the present and has an impact from the present on to the future. And yet the word itself doesn't talk about temporality. So now when we talk about tradition, we're going to talk about the 3 Bs. The 3 Bs according to Oxford. Oxford has a 3-pronged definition of tradition. The first is behaving in society. It's the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation. The second B is being in art. An artistic or literary method or style established by an artist, writer, or movement, and subsequently followed by others. So it means that you're forging an identity, an artistic identity that's so strong that it becomes a tradition to be followed and emulated by others in the future. And the third B is believing, religion. And it's a doctrine believed to have divine authority, though not in the scriptures. That's very interesting because if you're talking about religion, you think, well, religion is everything that is found in the religious book. But tradition implies that there are some religious principles that are not to be found in the religious book, but are accepted anyway. So we go off script. The fact of forging an artistic identity, going off script, and the individual working with society are 3 elements that are essential to any human being, including from my perspective as an artist, as a musician, and for you as creatives, members of society, and members of a family, society, work environment, etc. So this concerns all of us, these 3 elements of tradition. Now, I'm going to start a polemic because there are people who love tradition and there are people who hate tradition. So I'd like to know who likes tradition, who thinks tradition is good. Okay, that's pretty good. So it looks about half the room. I kind of came up with a couple of things. We have, why could it be good? Well, it gives us a sense of belonging. If we share a tradition, we belong to the people who share the tradition. We create bonds between people. Oh, you like X? I like X too. Do you do it on a Friday? Yeah, me too. Oh, that's great. Okay, let's do it together. It provides comfort and familiarity. Oh, you like X? I like X too. What do you like about it? Well, I like that it's pink. Yeah, me too, actually. And so we're getting to know each other, and I'm comfortable with you because you like X and because it's pink. So we share something. I feel comfortable with you. I know you. It gives identity. I'm someone who likes X, and I like X because it's pink, and I can brand it. I can show that to people, and people can identify me through the tradition. It imparts significance. A Friday could be a normal Friday, but if I say with my tradition that it's a special Friday, and that I'm going to mark it as a special Friday because it's going to be a pink Friday where I have my X, well, there you go. Now it's a special occasion. And we need special occasions in life. Otherwise, it's just kind of a steady stream of the same. So if we can plant a flag on specific points in our life, that's a good thing. And we share knowledge. Tradition is about, in part, sharing knowledge. Well, our ancestors discovered that, let's say, eating pigs at a certain point in time was dangerous because they had some kind of disease. And so they said, don't eat the pigs anymore. They're bad news. And that came down and down and down and down. And so that was knowledge, because if you ate the pig and the pigs were still sick, you wouldn't live to tell about it. So the people who knew told, and then there were more healthy people. So sharing knowledge. Okay. Now, who thinks that tradition is bad? Right? Okay, there are some people who think it's bad. Let's talk about why it's bad. It can create tensions. If I have a tradition and you have another tradition, and my tradition is not okay with your tradition, we're at odds, it creates tensions, right? I believe that 2 + 2 should only be 4 on Tuesday. And you say, that doesn't make sense. 2 + 2 is always 4 every day of the week. So there's tension. It blocks innovation. If we have to respect tradition, we have to do it in the same way all the time. Well, then how can we do it a different way? If we're always doing it the same way, then how can we explore other ways? So, could block innovation. Stifles originality. Well, everybody does it this way. This is tradition. What are you doing? You're doing something different. That's not traditional. That's not okay. You're being strange, other. And maybe that's not looked well upon. It encourages discrimination. Well, this part of the room, we share the same tradition, but you guys over there don't share the same tradition, so I don't think we should be talking with them, do you? No. So, and we talk about nonconformists again. You know, we're all sitting, but there are 3 people standing. Well, that's weird. That's remarkable. How do you feel about that? Are they strange? Maybe what are they doing? Why are they doing that? You know, so creates that tension again. And it discourages dialogue. If we have tradition, we can say, well, that's our tradition. The end. You know, that's how the grandfather did it, that's how the father did it, that's how I did it, that's how my children are going to do it. What do we need to talk about? That's tradition. And if someone says, but I'd like to challenge the tradition, I'd like to do something else, the response could be, why? It's tradition. So, can tradition be good? Yes. Can it be bad? Yes. So this is part of our problem, because we have traditions that are both good and bad, and they can be used in both good and bad ways. And because we live in a society, we have traditions. So what happens if we don't have tradition? It was interesting because I was trying to look for an antonym to tradition, and usually you can. You know, the antonym to good is bad, the antonym to light is dark, and so on. I didn't find one for tradition. You can have other things that take the place. If tradition is no longer there, a void will come in, or there will be a lack of order. But there's no direct antonym to tradition. But what can we have if we don't have tradition? Anarchy. So anarchy means no rules, a free space. Anybody can do whatever they want, right? That's one thing. We can have innovation. If we don't have restraints, then anything is possible. And so you can just innovate. You can think out of the box because we have no more box. So there you go. Universal acceptance. This was an interesting thing. Who's a programmer here? Okay. Can anybody tell me what is the meaning of that? The universal acceptance principle? Anybody? Top level domain? Does this ring a bell? Oh my goodness gracious. So, top level domain should function within all applications, regardless of script, number of characters, or how new it is, right? Universal acceptance. If we don't have tradition anymore, we don't have parameters. So everything is okay. Or everything is not okay. But we don't have any standards anymore because there are no walls, there are no restraints. So it could be a good thing because then everybody is beautiful, right? Brown hair, blonde hair, short hair, long hair, who knows? Everything's fine, everything's beautiful. We have no criteria, so everything can go. But if we have no standards, then how do we know if something's good or not? So, are these things good or are they bad? Who thinks they're good? Okay. Who thinks they're bad? And who thinks they can be both too? Okay. So we see that tradition is neutral. It can be either or. It depends on the user and it depends on the context. We also see that the things that will come in if we don't have tradition, if we loosen the bonds of tradition, are also neither positive nor negative. They contain both. And it's up to the context and the user. the interesting thing about neutrality is neutrality can be positive or negative in and of itself, which is strange because that's neutral. How can neutral be positive? How can neutral be negative? And yet, you can have two states of neutrality. You can have a stagnant state where everything is dead and you have no energy, it's stasis, and that's a type of neutrality. Or you can have an active state of neutrality where different and conflicting energies are colliding together and creating a synergy, and its totality is neutrality. So that's an active charged state of neutrality. And it's this active charged state of neutrality that I want us to remember as we're talking with something, its opposite, and value judgment. Okay? Houston, we have a problem. Tradition and creativity. Classical musician's dilemma. We're musicians, we're performers. We're supposed to be doing something fresh, exciting for live people in real time. And we're working with works of 300 years old. We have to play it like this, not like that. We have to play the notes like 100%. If it's not 100% correct, it's wrong. And people say, oh, she missed some notes there. So it's very, very particular. And we have to deal with tradition, but we also have to deal with creation because we're artists. So how do we do that? We have the classical music smackdown. So on the one hand, we have restriction and restraint. And whether it's your parent or your teacher, somebody is always asking you, will you practice today? We have to get into the practice room. We are there by ourselves with our instrument for hours at a time, doing the same things again and again and again, and again and again and again. And we do things that make no sense, like scales, just scales, again and again and again. We do scales slowly. We do them quickly. We do them tied. We do them staccato. We do them on one hand. We do them on the other hand. We do them in the same direction. We do them in opposite directions. And it has no artistic meaning. We just do it. And it's kind of tough sometimes. And in the other corner, we have freedom and spontaneity. And that's when you have to just let it go, as my 5-year-old daughter would sing. So that's when you're on stage, you're performing, you're in the moment, you're not thinking of the scales, you're not thinking of the blood on the keyboard because you spent 6 hours a day on it for like the past years. And you're in the moment. And we have to reconcile this. So, yeah, what's the solution? The solution is embrace the paradox. So we can't have tradition in our métier of being a classical musician if we don't go beyond the tradition. If we don't work really hard on our pieces to be completely free with them, we cannot communicate what we need to communicate with the public. But if we only want to communicate with the public and we didn't do the work of knowing and discovering and learning and appropriating the tradition, then we're just going to have like kind of the French say, a moment de solitude. So you're up on stage and you don't really know what you're doing and you don't really know what you're saying, but I really want to communicate with you guys. Do you feel what I'm feeling? But you can't because I'm playing like Mozart-ish, but I'm not really playing Mozart. You're feeling that I can't express what I should be expressing to you because I haven't done my work on appropriating the architecture through which I can speak. And that architecture for us is the tradition of classical music and the pieces that we have to play to you. So you have to embrace the paradox and be in that active state of neutrality. I have a couple of phrases from one of my favorite books. Has anybody listened to Stefan Nachmanovich and his book Free Play? Has anybody read that? No? I highly recommend it. It's kind of standard for actors and classical musicians in the United States, at least. But it can apply to anybody in a creative sector, and even with yourself in life. It's very interesting. And he talks about these paradoxes. So structure ignites spontaneity, right? That's pretty weird. When we are totally faithful to our own individuality, we're actually following a very intricate design. So you say, I want to be me, I want to be me, I want to be totally free. Okay. But being you and being totally free is very precise. And you are the only you. It's extremely structured and unique. So we have, in the will to be individual, we have a great structure, as a matter of fact. Creativity is a harmony of opposite tensions. Talking about this active state of neutrality again. Different things creating tension and release. Has anybody taken a little bit of music, piano or something like that? Great. Okay. So you guys know that when we're at the tonic key is home base, right? If the piece is in the key of C major is our home base. That's the tonic key. We're good. Then we start moving. And we're going to move, and we go to like D major maybe. Then we go to F major. We're getting pretty far away from C major. Then we go to Sol major. That's the dominant. Dominant has a lot of tension. We're very far away from home. We feel that tension. And then there's the resolution. So with the tension comes resolution, and the 5 goes back to 1, and we're back to the home base. Tension and release is the basic principle of music, and it's the basic principle of life, and it's the basic principle of tradition. Then the flashpoint of creation in the present moment is where work and play emerge. It's another set of paradoxes. Well, how can you work and play at the same time? What does that even mean? And yet, when you have these two contrasting paradoxical elements and they're working together, and one is not overpowering the other, but both are healthfully kind of going about it, sparring with each other, that's where you get your great points of creation and creativity. Consider the snowflake. You know that snowflakes are made of water. They come from the sky. They fall down. Consider that each snowflake is individual. There are no two snowflakes the same. Why? If they all come from the same source, and they're all made up the same element, and they all land basically on the same surface, why are they all different? Their structure is different. Why? Does anybody know? It's the trajectory that each raindrop or drop of water has while falling from the sky to the earth. The different changes in temperature, wind, little specks of dust that encounter it, that transform it and make it uniquely beautiful and special. It's not what it's made of in the beginning, it's how it gets transformed through its very particular journey that makes it what it is. Now consider musical notes. These are the first 12 notes, chromatic notes, in the first octave of the piano. And there's a bowl of water, and the bowl of water resonates with each one of the tones as they're played. And the result of the vibrations of the water is what you see here. Now, what's very interesting, I'm sure you can see, there's some similarities between a snowflake and musical notes. They are still dealing with elements, the basic elements of water and wind, vibration in the air. And it depends on the length of each string and the particularity of each string, whether it's a C string, a C sharp string, a D string, etc. And as we go up, the strings get shorter and shorter and shorter. Their particularity influences the final result of their vibrations. Another paradox is the individual versus the universal. What we saw in the snowflakes and what we saw in those musical notes, we can see again in these quotes. Originality does not mean being unlike the past or present. It means being the origin, acting out of your own center, out of your spontaneous heart. You may do something reminiscent of the very old, but it will be original because it will be yours. That, for a classical musician, is super important. And being a classical musician is kind of like being a member of society. Classical musician has to take the traditions and appropriate them, make them ours, and make them living and relevant to me. And then I can share my truth, my version of tradition with you, the public. You in society have your own set of traditions, and you can choose to accept them, to change them, to negate them, or to make new ones. You might be drawn to the past or only look to the future, but your take will be unique, beautiful, and will be original because it's yours. And the other one is, paradoxically, the more you are yourself, the more universal your message. So the more original you are, the more universal actually you are, because as you develop and individuate, that was an interesting word, I didn't know that one existed, but whatever, more deeply, you break through into deeper layers of the collective unconscious and the collective conscious. There's yet another paradox. So what does that mean for us? In the words of Oscar Wilde, a wonderful original playwright and creator, the way of paradoxes is the way of truth. So if you feel in conflict with different things, tradition versus innovation, is tradition good or bad? Is innovation good or bad? The answer is yes. And that's okay. Thank you.